Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze how Pep Guardiola's tactical approach created issues for Arsenal's 5-4-1. So in today's video, first we're going to focus on City's 4-3-3 in possession, then we'll shift to Arsenal's 5-4-1 out of possession and see what Mikel Arteta wanted his men to do to stop City from creating chances, and then we'll focus on how City were able to bypass the Arsenal press. When you break down the game and we do look at the board, we have Arsenal starting in a 5-4-1 and Man City in a 4-3-3. Or in recent time, we've seen Guardiola's side start in more of a 5-1-4. Here we did see elements of a 3-2-5, where you'd have Cancelo either shift centrally to help Rodri in that midfield zone, and there were times where Kyle Walker was also shifting into that central area, and they were attempting to drag away Saka and Smith Rowe into those areas to create passing outlets for their wide players in Grealish and Gabriel Jesus. We'll focus on Arsenal's defensive setup initially. They're in a 5-4-1, and what you end up seeing is that in this particular setup, they're looking to ensure that they have 3v3 at the back against City's front three. That could see Cancelo and Walker pushing forward, and that allows Cedric and Tierney to step towards them if they are in advanced positions. But what we ended up seeing was that Grealish was holding the touchline towards the left-hand side, and he was forcing Cedric to step out into that zone. And what ended up happening was that you ended up seeing Gundogan and Bernardo Silva pushing into those advanced positions, while Gabriel Jesus held the wide position as well. Walker and Cancelo were initially narrow, and then Rodri was sitting just ahead of the center backs. In most situations, you have Gundogan and Bernardo Silva just ahead of Kolasinac and Chambers, and with them often looking to drop off deeper, they were hoping to pull out those wider center backs, as that creates space for Ferran Torres to spin to the left or the right of Holding to receive the ball just in behind the Arsenal backline. There was a time in the opening stage where you ended up seeing Walker receive the ball and he pulled out Smith Rowe, and that resulted in Gabriel Jesus dragging out Tierney and Walker playing the ball beyond Tierney and Kolasinac for the run of Torres, but the pass was slightly overhit. Ferran Torres' role was unchanged as he looked to drop off into that midfield zone to pull out Holding, then spin off him to break in behind. But there were times where Ferran Torres simply dropped off into that midfield zone unmarked, and that also created an opportunity to create those overloads. Obviously, there were scenarios where you ended up seeing Gundogan shift to the touchline and Grealish occupy Chambers, whereas you also ended up seeing Gundogan just ahead of Chambers, Grealish on the left touchline, and then Gabriel Jesus tucking in narrow, while Bernardo Silva was looking to receive the ball in the half space on the outside of Smith Rowe. Cancelo often occupied a narrow position in that midfield zone, and that often forced the attention of Saka to shift over to close him down. And then as you could see in that midfield zone, you have Odegaard and Xhaka in that central area. And Xhaka was looking to close down Gundogan, but when Gundogan pushed higher, he would occupy Chambers. And then you would see Odegaard stepping into the path of Rodri looking to close him down. What would have been ideal here was to have Aubameyang sitting on Rodri and then Odegaard shifting across to deal with Bernardo Silva. So put simply, Pep wanted his wider players to stretch out Tierney and Cedric, and then he had his fullbacks in narrow positions to pull out Smith Rowe and Saka. And with Odegaard looking a step forward to Rodri, that created gaps for Gundogan and Bernardo Silva to drop off into those midfield zones to create overloads. And if Chambers or Kolasinac did look to step tight, it creates space in those areas behind the backline for Torres to break into, and you could also have runs from Gabriel Jesus or Grealish to break in behind. But the biggest issue that Arsenal encountered here was the movement of Bernardo Silva and Gundogan, and their press couldn't cope with that threat. Because when we focus on Arsenal's pressure, what we ended up seeing was that Aubameyang was stepping to Ruben Diaz. You had Saka blocking off the passing lane into Cancelo, but looking to step forward to Laporte. And then that's where you end up seeing the midfield battle causing Arsenal issues. Odegaard was stepping towards Rodri, Gundogan was tracked by Xhaka, but then you have Smith Rowe stepping towards Walker. The issue that Arsenal encountered now is Bernardo Silva was dropping off Kolasinac into that midfield zone, and that created a 1v2 disadvantage for Smith Rowe. Smith Rowe could shift across to close down Bernardo Silva, and that was what he should have done, but that leaves Kyle Walker free, and he was wary of doing that. There were times in the earlier stages where when Smith Rowe shifted towards Walker, Aubameyang would drop off to close down Bernardo Silva, and that appeared to be an effective alternative. but to ask Aubameyang to sustain that throughout the game was a big ask. So where Bernardo Silva was causing issues by dropping off deeper into his own third to disrupt Arsenal's press from the front, Gundogan's ability to make forward runs towards the back post, off Chambers or off Xhaka into advanced positions, or by simply shifting laterally in that pocket of space to receive the ball between the lines, caused Arsenal several issues as well. The issue that Arsenal had on the opposite side was that if Saka steps towards Laporte, he can instantly play the ball to Cancelo, and then that creates a 2v1 on that side. So what needed to happen was if Saka blocks off the passing lane to Cancelo, Cedric has to step forward to close him down. And with Smith Rowe shifting towards Bernardo Silva, you need Tierney to push forward to close down Walker. So that forces Chambers and Kolasinac to pick up Gabriel Jesus and Grealish. If this is done cohesively, then that ensures that City can't play through the press. And there were times where you had Ederson on the ball and he had no passing options. Then you could see Bernardo Silva dropping to split the center backs, but Smith Rowe following him to apply pressure. And you already have Saka and Aubameyang ahead of the center backs. You could see Tierney and Cedric pushing forward to close down Walker and Cancelo, but focus on Ferran Torres dropping into that midfield zone. And that's where you see Holding stepping forward to apply pressure, while Gundogan is closed down by Xhaka. And here's a clearer example of City encountering issues with Arsenal's press, with Ederson on the ball and no passing options because you have Tierney stepping towards Walker, while Smith Rowe tucks in narrow to close down Bernardo Silva as Odegaard is closing down Rodri. Ultimately, the biggest factor that led to Arsenal's downfall was that press, because their players were simply caught out of position. And if you look to some of their breakdowns, it's simply Smith Rowe not picking up his man, Xhaka being pulled centrally and then not getting back into position, and at times it was simply Saka not dropping back to ensure that there wasn't a numerical advantage for Pep Guardiola's men. In the build-up to City's opener, you witness the issues that Arsenal encounter against City's overload. Bernardo Silva drops into his own half to pick up the ball ahead of Odegaard. You see Smith Rowe not near Bernardo Silva, and he's looking to close down Walker if he does receive the ball. However, when you focus towards that halfway circle, it's Ferran Torres dropping off to check into the ball to pull out Holding, and Xhaka's now moving away from Gundogan to close down Rodri. As that play develops, the ball is played into the path of Ruben Diaz, and Bernardo Silva continues his forward movement, and that's where Smith Rowe now has to shift across to close him down tight, but he doesn't. What you also see happening here is while Odegaard is tight on Rodri, focus on Gundogan, who's now in a pocket of space because Xhaka was dragged into that halfway circle. Ruben Diaz ends up splitting Saka and Xhaka to find Gundogan in that zone, but Chambers does a very good job of stepping forward to apply tight pressure towards Gundogan, and he covers for Xhaka. But the issue that Arsenal encounter here is once again focus in that halfway circle. It's Bernardo Silva continuing his movement and Smith Rowe not getting tight to close him down. That results in Gundogan doing a very good job of holding off that pressure and then splitting Odegaard and Xhaka to find Bernardo Silva in pockets of space beyond Smith Rowe. And that results in Bernardo Silva carrying the ball into Arsenal's half, and he plays the diagonal ball into the right channel. While the play does slow down, the defensive mistake that Arsenal make here is that when Gabriel Jesus plays that ball towards the back post, Chambers fails to deal with it, and Gundogan makes a late run in behind him to put City ahead. This is an example of Smith Rowe shifting across to close down Kyle Walker, while Xhaka steps into the path of Bernardo Silva dropping off deeper, and you can have Aubameyang dropping off in this position to close down Rodri, because look at the opposite side. You have Gundogan free in a pocket of space, and perhaps that's where you need Chambers to step towards him if he does get on the ball. But it would also be simple if you could have Aubameyang shifting to Rodri and then have Odegaard drop off into that midfield zone to protect the center of the pitch. Smith Rowe's pressure ends up forcing the ball back into the path of Ruben Diaz, and when Diaz receives the ball, you could see Xhaka now not picking up Bernardo Silva as he pushes into the path of Kolasinac, but focus on Gundogan, who now has the ability to drift laterally into that pocket of space between Xhaka and Odegaard, as Saka doesn't want to shift over due to the threat of Cancelo. Ruben Diaz identifies Gundogan in that pocket of space, and he ends up playing a forward pass that splits Odegaard and Xhaka to find Gundogan between the lines, and from that position, when he receives the ball, he's able to spin away from Odegaard and Xhaka, and that results in the free kick that City win in the build-up to their second goal. And then when you focus on the defensive mistake, it's a short free kick that results in Bernardo Silva having free time to deliver a cross into the box. But focus on that penalty area. You see a 3v2 overload with Ruben Diaz, Mahrez, and Ferran Torres just ahead of Xhaka and Holding. And then you see Chambers being occupied. Bernardo Silva's initial cross is poor, but Cedric fails to clear it. And that results in the ball bypassing Xhaka, Ruben Diaz's run taking away Holding, Saka not tracking back, and that results in Ferran Torres receiving the ball free in that 6-yard box to put City up 2-0. In the build-up to City's third goal following Xhaka's dismissal, you could see the Arsenal midfield bank caught out of position. You could see Odegaard stepping towards Rodri, but focus on that right-hand side where you have Cedric pushing high towards Cancelo and Smith Rowe near him as well. That's where you end up seeing Saka now in a position where he should be near Bernardo Silva, but also prepared to step towards Walker, and that's where you see Ferran Torres dropping off the center backs into a pocket of space. Ederson ends up splitting Cedric and Odegaard, and that allows Ferran Torres to carry the ball into Arsenal's half to run at the Arsenal backline. And you can see Bernardo Silva following him with Grealish to his left and Jesus in between Tierney and Kolasinac. The defensive mistake that Arsenal make here is that as Grealish is in a 1v1 with Chambers, sure, Holding does step to block the pullback and it leaves Ferran Torres open, but you could see Gabriel Jesus goal side of Kolasinac. When that pullback is played, that's where you see Gabriel Jesus receiving the ball ahead of the left center back, and he's able to tap in City's third. If we look to another example, here you can see Arsenal's press with Aubameyang stepping to Ruben Diaz. You have Odegaard and Smith Rowe stepping to Bernardo Silva and Rodri, and Tierney's pushing high on Walker. But when you look to the opposite side, you have Saka looking to step ahead to Ederson, who's about to receive the ball, opposed to closing down Laporte. As that play develops, what you end up seeing is Ederson does receive the ball and he drags Saka towards him. But in that position, Saka has to win this ball, because if he doesn't, you could see both Laporte and now Cancelo dropping off deeper, and they're going to be free to advance the play with half of Arsenal's attacking line shifted to the left-hand side. In that situation, this is where Cedric should be tight on Cancelo near that penalty area, and when the ball is played into the path of Laporte, you could eventually see him dropping off the ball into the path of Cancelo, and that's when you eventually see Cedric stepping late to apply pressure and Xhaka doing a good job on Gundogan. However, what ends up happening is that Laporte receives the ball, and that's where he's able to now force Cedric towards him, and he slides the ball into the path of Grealish, who drops in towards his own half, and Chambers doesn't mark him tightly, and that gives Grealish the time to receive the ball and now run at Chambers. And as you can see here, Grealish ends up carrying the ball into Arsenal's half, and that's where Cedric shifts across to pull him down for a booking as Chambers retreats into his own half. So as you can see, a combination of individual defensive mistakes and disjointed Arsenal pressing resulted in Guardiola's Man City dominating Arteta's 5-4-1.